The door swung open, and the soft chime of the restaurant's entrance bell barely caught anyone's attention. Inside, the air was filled with the quiet hum of conversations, the clinking of silverware, and the occasional laughter from diners enjoying their meals. It was an upscale place, pristine white tablecloths, dim golden lighting, and a scent of rich spices that promised luxury. Then, the room went silent. A well-dressed black family stood at the entrance, their presence shifting the atmosphere almost instantly. The father, tall and dignified, wore a tailored navy blue suit that fit him perfectly, his posture exuding quiet confidence. Beside him, his wife, elegant and poised, rested her hand gently on their young son's shoulder. They had no idea that within the next few minutes, their entire world was about to change. A waiter hesitated before approaching. He glanced nervously toward the manager, who stood near the bar, watching with narrowed eyes. The hesitation wasn't lost on the family. They had seen it before. The father gave the waiter a patient smile. "Table for 3, please." The waiter's lips parted slightly, as if considering his response. But before he could speak, the manager stepped in, adjusting his tie as he strode forward. His expression was smug, his tone laced with barely hidden contempt. "I'm sorry, but we don't have any open tables." The father's eyebrows lifted slightly as he scanned the restaurant. Nearly half the tables were empty. "Strange," he said, his voice calm. "Your reservation system showed multiple available slots." The manager's lips twitched into an almost imperceptible smirk. "I'm afraid there's been an error. And besides," he gestured vaguely at their attire, "we have a certain dress code here." The young boy clutched his mother's hand. His small face showed confusion, but not surprise. He had seen this look before, the same forced politeness masking something ugly. The father chuckled softly. Not in amusement, but in recognition. "Ah," he said, nodding knowingly. The mother exchanged a glance with him, her eyes holding a quiet understanding. They had expected this. The father stepped forward slightly, looking the manager in the eye. "Are you sure about that?" The entire restaurant was watching now. Some customers glanced at each other, whispering. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The manager's smirk didn't falter. "Yes, I'm sure." Then came the phone call. A sharp, urgent ringtone cut through the silence. The manager frowned and pulled his phone from his pocket. His eyes darted to the screen, and suddenly, his expression changed. His face lost its color. His fingers trembled slightly as he pressed the phone to his ear. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was firm, authoritative. "I need you to stay exactly where you are. I'm arriving in 5 minutes." The call ended. The manager swallowed hard. For the first time that evening, he looked uncertain. The father stepped forward and pulled out a chair. Calmly, as if he owned the place. "Let's take a seat," he told his wife and son. "Things are about to change." The restaurant watched in stunned silence. What was happening? Who was this man? And why did the manager suddenly look terrified? What none of them knew, in just a few minutes, the restaurant would no longer belong to the manager, but to them. The restaurant fell into an uneasy silence. Conversations that once filled the air had faded into murmurs, eyes flickering between the well-dressed black family and the manager, who now stood frozen, gripping his phone tightly. The father leaned back in his chair, his fingers lightly tapping against the polished wooden table as he studied the manager's pale face. The mother smoothed the napkin on her lap, her expression unreadable. Their young son, unaware of the tension, reached for the menu, but the manager's sharp voice cut through the moment. "You need to leave. Now." His earlier smugness had been replaced by unease, but his arrogance still remained. The father raised an eyebrow. "Why?" The manager exhaled sharply, then squared his shoulders. I told you, we don't have an open table for you. This isn't a place for, he stopped himself, but the meaning hung in the air, clear as day. A few diners gasped. Others, likely agreeing with him, said nothing at all. The mother's lips pressed together, but she said nothing. The father, however, remained perfectly composed. I see. His tone was measured, calm. And you're sure about this? The manager scoffed. Of course, I'm sure. The father nodded slowly. Then, as if completely unbothered, he reached for the menu his son had been looking at and casually flipped through the pages. Interesting selection, he remarked. I assume the lobster tail is good? The manager's jaw clenched. Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but I. The front doors swung open with force. A middle-aged man in a dark gray suit strode inside, his expensive watch glinting under the chandelier light. His presence immediately demanded attention. This was no ordinary man. The manager's expression crumbled. His confidence shattered into something closer to fear. Sir, the manager stammered. The man ignored him. His sharp gaze landed directly on the family seated at the table. Then, to everyone's shock, he smiled. He walked straight over to the father and extended his hand. It's an honor to finally meet you in person, he said. The father returned the handshake, his expression unreadable. The manager gasped. Other customers exchanged confused glances. Who was this man? And why was he treating the very family the manager had just insulted, with such deep respect? The father nodded. Likewise. The gray-suited man turned to the manager. His face hardened. Would you like to explain to me, he said slowly, why you just turned away the new owners of this restaurant? A collective gasp rippled through the room. The manager's knees nearly buckled. The mother reached for her water glass, hiding a knowing smile. The young boy, still too young to understand the weight of the moment, simply looked up at his father with wide eyes. The manager opened his mouth, but no words came out. Because for the first time in his life, he had just denied service, to his own bosses. The manager's face drained of color. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He had just denied service to the new owners of the restaurant. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly unsure of where they stood. A few waiters exchanged wide-eyed glances, sensing the storm about to unfold. The man in the gray suit, still standing beside the black family, folded his arms. Well? His voice was sharp, authoritative. I asked you a question. Why did you turn them away? The manager licked his lips, his confidence crumbling. I didn't know, sir. Oh, you knew, the father interrupted, his voice calm but firm. You saw us. Judged us. Denied us. He leaned back in his chair, drumming his fingers lightly against the table. And you were absolutely sure about your decision. The manager swallowed hard. Sweat began to form at his temples. Sir, The man in the gray suit cut him off. Stop talking. Silence. The manager looked like a man awaiting his fate. The suited man sighed, rubbing his temple. For the past few months, we've been evaluating leadership across all locations. Do you know what we've noticed? The manager shook his head, barely able to breathe. We noticed that this location, despite having premium clientele, has been underperforming. Complaints. Poor reviews. And after what I just witnessed, he shook his head. I finally understand why. The weight of those words made the manager visibly wilt. The father exhaled, folding his hands together. Tell me something, Mr. Manager, he said evenly. If we had been a different kind of family. If we had looked more like you. Would you have turned us away? The manager froze. His lips pressed together, but no answer came. Because they all knew the truth. The father studied him for a moment, then simply nodded. That's what I thought. The suited man turned to the family. I deeply apologize for this. This is not how we run our business. The father waved a hand dismissively. We expected it. The mother, still composed, finally spoke. The question is, what happens next? The suited man nodded grimly. Then he turned back to the pale-faced manager. You're fired. The manager's world collapsed in an instant. You're fired, he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. The suited man nodded without hesitation. Immediately. Gasps echoed throughout the restaurant. The waitstaff froze, their hands gripping trays and menus as if bracing for impact. Customers exchanged wide-eyed glances. The once smug manager, who had sneered at the black family just moments ago, stood trembling in place. But I've worked here for years, the manager stammered. I didn't know who they were. You can't just. I can, and I did, the suited man interrupted coldly. You should have known. You should have treated them with basic human decency. His gaze sharpened. Instead, you exposed yourself. You made it very clear what kind of leader you are. And we don't need that in our business. The manager staggered back like he had been physically struck. I'll change, he pleaded, his arrogant facade completely shattered. Please. I need this job. The father leaned forward slightly, watching him with a calm intensity. You didn't think twice about throwing us out, he mused. You didn't consider our dignity, our experience, or our worth. You saw us, assumed we didn't belong, and dismissed us. The mother finally spoke, her voice smooth and controlled. Why should we show you the grace you refuse to give us? Silence. The manager had no answer. Then, the father smiled. Not a cruel smile. A knowing one. You're lucky, he said simply. Because we're not like you. The manager blinked. The suited man exhaled slowly. You will not be keeping your managerial role. That is final. The manager's shoulders sagged. But then, the suited man paused. However, there may be another way. The entire restaurant leaned in. The father tilted his head. Go on. The suited man folded his arms. We don't believe in throwing people away. But we do believe in teaching lessons. His gaze flickered toward the manager. He has two choices. The manager looked up quickly, desperate. Choice 1, the suited man said. You leave now. No references. No second chances. No future in this company. The manager gulped. He was already imagining the job rejections. And choice 2, he croaked. The father smiled again. You work here, under us. The restaurant erupted. Gasps. Shock. Whispers of disbelief. The mother nodded thoughtfully. If you truly believe in learning and changing, then prove it. Work under the very people you dismissed. The manager's face burned with humiliation. Be the one taking orders, the father added, leaning back. Be the one serving those you once refused to serve. The manager looked horrified. You have 30 seconds to decide, the suited man said. The seconds ticked down. The entire restaurant held its breath. Would the once arrogant manager accept humility? Or would he walk away forever? The restaurant held its breath. The manager stood frozen, his mind racing. The weight of the moment pressed against him. He had spent years looking down on people like them, dismissing them, denying them respect. And now, he was at their mercy. Tick. 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 The suited man folded his arms. Your time's almost up. The father tilted his head slightly, observing the man in front of him. "Pride is a dangerous thing," he said. "But so is regret. This is your moment, choose wisely." The manager gulped. Every eye in the restaurant was locked on him. He felt like the entire world was watching, judging, waiting. He thought about his bills. He thought about his future. But most of all, he thought about his own arrogance. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "I'll stay." A collective gasp rippled through the room. The father's eyes flickered with something unreadable. The mother remained silent, watching. The suited man nodded approvingly. "You start tomorrow," he said simply. The manager's stomach twisted. Tomorrow? Already? He had been at the top of the chain just moments ago, and now? Now, he would be taking orders. Serving. Cleaning. He had become the very thing he once mocked. The new owners take over. By the next morning, the transformation had begun. The Black family walked into the restaurant, not as guests, but as its new owners. The staff lined up nervously, awaiting their instructions. Some looked relieved. Others were still in shock. The former manager, now in a server's uniform, stood stiffly to the side, his face pale. The father scanned the room. "Things are about to change," he announced. The staff listened in silence. "No one here will ever be turned away because of their skin color, their background, or their status," he continued. "We serve people, not prejudices." Some of the waiters exchanged glances, nodding subtly. The restaurant had always felt off. Now, it was different. The mother added, "We will treat every customer with the respect they deserve. And that starts with treating our employees the same way." Then, she turned to the former manager. "And you," she said, her voice measured. He stiffened. She handed him a notepad and a pen. "Table 5 needs water," she said. "Go." The staff watched, holding their breath. Would he do it? The former manager looked at the simple request. It was humiliating. Serving the very people he once thought were beneath him. But he had made his choice. So he moved. For the first time in his life, he picked up a tray, not a clipboard. He served. And as he walked toward table 5, something shifted in the air. The restaurant would never be the same again. The former manager felt every eye on him as he approached table 5 with a tray of water glasses. His fingers trembled slightly, the weight of humiliation pressing down on him. Just yesterday, he had stood above them all, issuing orders. Today, he was taking them. The older woman at the table looked up at him, her gaze unreadable. She had witnessed the entire incident the night before. "Thank you," she said politely, accepting the water. He forced a nod, swallowing his pride. "You're welcome." He turned away quickly, hoping to avoid further conversation, but as he moved past the kitchen doors, he heard it, the whispers. "Look at him now. Karma hit fast. Bet he won't last a week." His face burned. Some of the staff, the very ones he had dismissed for years, were watching him with quiet satisfaction. Others merely observed, waiting to see if he would break. The father of the Black family, his new boss, stood near the bar, arms crossed. He was watching everything, but he said nothing. The struggle begins. The former manager struggled. His hands weren't steady. He forgot orders. He spilled coffee on a customer's table. He flinched at every snicker. But no one stepped in to help him. No one offered him a lifeline, just like he had never offered one to anyone else. By the end of the lunch rush, his uniform was stained, his back ached, and his pride was shattered. And yet, he remained. A mysterious customer arrives. Later that evening, just as he was beginning to grasp his new reality, a man walked in. The moment the father saw him, his entire expression changed. The former manager froze. He recognized this man too. He was one of the most powerful investors in the city. A man who could make or break businesses with a single decision. The investor glanced at the former manager. Then he turned to the father and smiled. "I see you've started the process," the investor said, taking a seat. The father nodded. "It's necessary." The former manager's stomach twisted. What process? What was this really about? The investor leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "You've always been a businessman first," he said to the father. "So why did you buy this place?" The father smiled. "Because this isn't just about a restaurant," he said. "It's about setting an example." The investor nodded, seemingly impressed. The former manager paled. He suddenly realized, this wasn't just about humbling him. Something much bigger was at play. And for the first time since this nightmare had begun, he felt a flicker of something unexpected. Fear. The air inside the restaurant was thick with tension. The former manager felt it in every step, in every glance thrown his way. He had thought this was just punishment, a humiliating lesson in humility. But now, sitting across from the powerful investor, the truth was dawning on him. This was bigger than him. The investor leaned back in his chair, studying the father with curiosity. "So," he said, tapping his fingers against the table, "why did you really buy this place?" The father, who had remained calm and composed since the beginning, finally leaned forward. His expression was unreadable, his voice steady. "I didn't buy it to ruin him," he said, nodding toward the former manager. "I bought it because this restaurant, and many like it, have been quietly turning away people like me for years." The investor nodded slowly. "And now?" The father's lips curled into a small smile. "Now, it's a place for everyone." A ripple of murmurs spread through the staff. The waiters, the kitchen workers, they were all listening. The former manager swallowed hard. He had thought he was the center of this entire situation. That the family had bought the restaurant just to teach him a lesson. But now, he realized, he was just one piece of a much larger change. The change begins. By the next morning, the transformation was already in motion. The father stood in front of the employees, his hands resting on the counter. The entire staff had gathered, including the former manager, who now stood at the back, silent. "This restaurant has a new mission," the father announced. "No one will ever be turned away because of the way they look. No one will ever feel unwelcome in a place meant for hospitality." A few employees exchanged glances. Some looked relieved. Others, those who had once agreed with the former manager, shifted uncomfortably. "And one more thing," the mother added, stepping forward. "Everyone here gets equal opportunity. That means fair pay. That means fair promotions. That means no more managers who abuse their power." A stunned silence. Then, slowly, applause began. The former manager stood in the back, his stomach twisting. He had been in charge for years, and yet no one had ever clapped for him. The former manager's decision. That night, the former manager sat alone in the break room, staring at his reflection in the darkened window. He could quit. He could walk away and pretend this never happened. But something inside him whispered, that wouldn't be a win. For the first time in his life, he wondered, what if this was his second chance? He exhaled sharply and ran a hand through his hair. Could he really change? As he stood up, ready to leave for the night, he heard footsteps behind him. The father stood in the doorway, watching him. Without a word, he slid an envelope onto the table. The former manager frowned. "What's this?" "Your final decision," the father said. "Open it tomorrow morning." The former manager hesitated. Did this mean his time was up? With a heavy heart, he picked up the envelope. And as the father walked away, his final words echoed in the empty room. Decide what kind of man you want to be. The former manager sat at the break room table, staring at the sealed envelope in his hands. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned it over, feeling the weight of whatever decision lay inside. He had spent the night thinking. Thinking about his past. Thinking about the family that now owned the restaurant. Thinking about the humiliation he had endured these last few days. But also, thinking about his own mistakes. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just making excuses. He was facing the truth. With a deep breath, he tore open the envelope. His eyes widened. Inside was a job contract. Not as a manager. As a trainee. A handwritten note was attached. Leadership isn't about power. It's about service. If you truly want to change, prove it. The choice is yours. It was signed by the father. The final decision. The former manager gripped the paper tightly. This was his chance. He could walk away, leave this all behind, and blame the world for his downfall. Or, he could humble himself. He exhaled, feeling a strange mix of relief and fear. Slowly, he stood up. And for the first time in his life, he walked out of the break room not as a man in charge, but as a man willing to learn. One final challenge. The next morning, the restaurant was buzzing. Word had spread about the new owners, the new policies, and the former manager's downfall. Customers poured in, excited to see the changes firsthand. But not everyone was happy. Two angry customers approached the host stand, arms crossed. One of them scoffed, looking around with disgust. What happened to this place? One of them sneered. Letting just anyone in now? The restaurant fell silent. Waiters stopped in their tracks. Customers turned their heads. The father stood from his table. But before he could say a word, the former manager stepped forward. The restaurant held its breath. For the first time, he wasn't the one causing the problem. He was facing it. Calmly, he met the customer's gaze. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, his voice steady. "But if you have a problem with who we serve, then maybe this isn't the restaurant for you." A stunned silence. Then, applause. The father smiled. The mother gave a small nod of approval. The former manager had made his choice. And this time, he chose the right side. The restaurant had transformed. It was no longer a place of exclusion but one of inclusion. No longer built on arrogance and discrimination but on respect and opportunity. The once empty tables were now full. The once silent waitstaff now smiled. And the former manager? He was no longer a manager at all. A new beginning. Weeks had passed since his public stand against discrimination. He was no longer addressed as "sir." Now, he was just one of the team. He still made mistakes. Still struggled with his pride. But every day, he learned. And with every passing shift, something unexpected happened. He felt lighter. For the first time in his life, he wasn't climbing over others to prove his worth. He was earning it. A final conversation. One evening, after closing, the father found him in the kitchen, wiping down a table. "You've changed," the father said, leaning against the counter. The former manager paused, then sighed. "I had to." He glanced down at his hands, calloused from actual work. "I used to think power meant being above people." He exhaled. "I was wrong." The father nodded, watching him carefully. "So, what does power mean to you now?" The former manager was quiet for a long moment. Then, finally, he looked up. "Power is lifting others up," he admitted. "It's leading by example. It's being the kind of person people want to follow." The father smiled. "Now you understand." The lesson that changed everything. As the former manager left that night, stepping outside into the cool evening air, he felt something new. Not guilt. Not shame. Peace. Because for the first time in his life, he had truly earned his place. Not through power. Not through fear. Through change. And as he walked away from the restaurant, he realized. It wasn't just a job that had changed. It was him.